Hey guys, so today I want to introduce the Song of Roland, which is one of the two books that we're going to be going through over the next couple weeks. Now, the Song of Roland is a poem that is set in the 9th century, but was probably written several centuries after, or at least that's when we find the first copies of it. It was probably a story that was told in oral tradition and then eventually became transcribed. Now, the Song of Roland has to do with Charlemagne and Roland. Now, because this is written to an audience who already knew who Charlemagne was, the author is kind of expecting that you know who Charlemagne is and going in, similar to how if someone today in America were write about George Washington, you wouldn't need to give a huge introduction to George Washington. As soon as George Washington steps on the stage, you know who he is because he's that big of a figure. Well, back in the medieval ages, Charlemagne was a figure who was very much like this. So in case you don't know who he is, Charlemagne is one of the great Christian kings who ruled as a part of the Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Empire is kind of situated around Germany, but it often included parts of Italy, parts of France, parts of what we might call Poland, and some of those Eastern European countries. It kind of varied based on the time, how big it was, but Charlemagne is perhaps the great Christian king of the Middle Ages. And so when you read him into the book, you need to understand that he has that kind of level of importance to a lot of the folks in the medieval ages, and so he's a pretty big figure for them. But he kind of more plays as a role of a side character in this book. And it's going to be more focusing on Roland, which is one of the lieutenants in this. And it's focusing on a specific battle that happened in the 800s, at least that the book claims it happened. We're not really sure whether or not it happened or not. We don't really have much historical evidence. So it's really more of a literary retelling of a battle that could have happened in order to bring up some important themes. Now, some of the things that we're going to want to look at it. One of the big things that the Song of Roland does is it's one of the great medieval examples of the concept of chivalry. And so there's a brilliant introduction for this book in the copy that I have by Dorothy Sayers. If you happen to have this version with the introduction by Dorothy Sayers, if you have the time, I would absolutely recommend that you read it because it's one of the best introductions I've read for a book ever. It's that great. But anyways, there's a great little quote on page 15 that I want to read. In this, Dorothy Sayers says, quote, "In every age, art holds up to us the standard pattern of exemplary conduct, and real life does its best to conform." And so that's kind of what this book does, is it holds up the standard pattern of exemplary conduct for medieval knights and really for medieval society in general with the code of chivalry that kind of presents an example here. And so you're not going to open this book and you're going to see like a list of, oh, here's the 10 or 20 rules of chivalry or stuff like that, but you'll see it exemplified in each of the characters. Because what's really interesting is that all the characters really have a sense of chivalry. Certainly the heroes, but then also the villains often abide by the conduct of chivalry because that's just what you do in the medieval ages. And so we're going to want to be looking in this book for examples of chivalry and talking about what exactly the medieval concept of chivalry means, and how we should understand and perhaps apply parts of it to where we are today. Another thing that you're going to notice in the book is that it has incredibly human characters. When I was beginning to reread this 2 weeks ago, since I hadn't read this in the 6 or 7 years, I was really just blown away and shocked by how human a lot of the characters feel. A lot of the times in the Middle Ages, the characters kind of take second place to God. And to some of the more theological and religious concepts that are going, and it's really more focused on the mythic status than necessarily on how human they are. One of the things I noticed reading through the book is that the human characters it presents are so complex and so varied and intricate and such competing motivations that to me it really felt like some of the modern books that we end up reading that have themes very similar to that. So you definitely want to look at how complex are some of the motivations of the human characters there, and just the way that those characters are developed. And so that's kind of some of the main themes I'm going to want to look at when reading through this book. Now, one note to help you as you're reading through this book is that you're going to notice that many of the characters have multiple names for the same character. And this is because in French of this day, for those of you who have taken Latin, you know that there's a nominative and an accusative form. For those of you who may not have taken Latin, that's kind of saying the subject of the sentence and the direct object or the object of the preposition. The French had different names for the same character for both of them. So, for example, you're going to have a character like Charles, and he's going to be called Charles in the nominative case, and he's going to be called Carlon in the accusative case. And so you're going to see at various points both names presented here, both Charles and Carlon. And you're going to need to realize that it's talking about the same person. There's not a Charles and a Carlon. It's the same guy. The same thing goes for Gwennis or Ganelon. They're the same guy, as well as Marcel or Marcelon. That's also the same. So just that should be a helpful note as you're reading through it. Don't be reading through and be like, oh, who are these different people? These are going to be the same people. And unfortunately, that's just going to be a fact that you'll have to get used to. Anyways, I am really looking forward to teaching this book. I hope you guys enjoy it a lot, and I am looking forward to going through this book with you when we next meet.